and the floor is yours.
All right. My name is Tamara Ebenhoeh, and I live out in Frankenmuth, Michigan. And I'm an acrylic painter. Typically, I focus in on landscapes and all different kinds of animals. I love going through the state forests and all of our federal forests and looking and finding deer and elk. So that's basically what I do.
And could you tell us the inspiration for your artwork on the Art Around the City trail?
I think most of this comes from just, again, a love for the outdoors. And I find that deer and elk are just so graceful and beautiful, but at the same time, they're very sneaky and skittish. So I think the challenge of really tracking them down and finding them is the plus, is what I really enjoy with it. They're a 4-season animal, so you can see them in all different kinds of seasons. And so I think that makes it unique because, again, you see the landscape in four different ways all of the time too. It helps that Studio 23 is around because, they're open back up now, which is great. And I think they have such a wonderful, talented group there. Their exhibits are great. The staff is good. And that always, I think, leads to all of us feeling more creative and involved. And they're close, So I think that's really what helps inspire everybody.
And could you for us describe a day in your studio? Where are you creating?
I usually actually start out in the field through trail riding and hiking, walking through the woods. Sometimes you have to just sit really quiet and wait early in the morning, that kind of dawn dusk time frame. And then I'll take my camera, have a nice Nikon camera that I can take out and begin by doing some reference photographs. Once I do see a shot that I want to take, and then also do some sketching out in the field, and then going through and making notes on, where the sun is at, the time of the day it is, types of trees that I'm seeing out there, types of other plants that are out there, where the shadows are, and then any particular detail that I think is important on the animals themselves, on the deer or the elk. And then I go back to, I have a studio in Frankenmuth in my home, and really try and dedicate a full day's painting when I can, which kind of allows you the time to really work through getting the sketch down on the canvas and evaluating whether you have the right composition or not, or whether you can improve your composition. And so then I really start with the sketch on a canvas, and then start by painting in the very deepest deep darks and the very lightest lights, and try and get the value correct as I start, before I start any colors. So I'll typically start with grays. And while I'm painting, I try and use a 10-foot rule about every half an hour, which means you get up from either sitting or standing by an easel, and you back up 10 feet and you look at where you're at with the painting, because sometimes close up and far away are totally different. And so that's a good way of evaluating your color, your value, your composition. Again, do you want to change it? So I use that quite a bit and try and do what ifs all through. If I change something, if I want to get the background more atmospheric, what if I added more trees or took out more trees, or really blended the trees all together so they're all blurry and fuzzy, versus leaving everything, really detailed and with hard edges. So it's just that constant evaluation of beginning to put the paint down and then checking from far away. So as you would like hang it in a gallery or have it in public view, people typically are 8 to 10 feet away from something. And so that's like your perfect point of of observation with it. So at the end of, I'll try and paint all day. And then at the end of the day, I'll do like a very kind of critical review. I'm sure much like, you know, you do with your writing, where you say, okay, well, what do I like? What do I want to improve on? And then I'll set up an action list and set up supplies then. Typically redo my palette for the next day. And that's how the day would end, typically how the day would end. So I typically try and paint 2 to 3 days a week. If I can. Rainy days are wonderful. Snowy days are wonderful because sometimes, you know, you can really kind of stay in the studio a little easier than when it's so nice outside. So that's a little, I guess, a little bit about where I create and how I create.
Why do you work in your chosen medium?
I use acrylic paints because I find them very flexible. They dry fast. So especially if I'm trying to do something outdoor, if I'm doing some plein air painting where I have an easel outside, it's actually advantageous to have them dry fast sometimes because you don't have to be carrying them around wet. And you can actually put an extender in so they very much can mimic an oil paint by extending the drying time out. But I find that the colors are very vivid and deep. Usually an acrylic paint will dry 1 to 2 times darker than an oil, whereas oil is what you see is what you get. With acrylic, you can actually come up with some very beautiful, beautiful mixes and have them deepen the overall tone of the painting. I use Golden acrylics, which is a brand name, and it's a very smooth, blendable, kind of a buttery type of paint. So it spreads very evenly and easy, and you can thicken it. So if you want to really have thicker paint, it's easy to do, or you can glaze it and go really, really thin in layer paint. And I typically, in terms of my style, I do much more glazing probably than a thick paint would be my approach. But it works great. I love it. Everybody settles on, I think, their own medium. But yeah.